You are welcome to Humanist TV Africa. You are watching us live here at Humanist TV Africa. My name is Kato Mukasa, your host. And of course, in the studio, we have Dennis Bongole to do the production. Humanist TV Africa is a charity organization. We are registered as a charity, a non-government organization, registered to do media work, especially on social media, sharing on matters that people don't normally talk about, but are so important to our survival as the human kind. So today, as it is every Saturday, we have experts on consumer rights, food safety issues, and of course, these experts are always with us each Saturday, and we talk about issues that affect us directly and indirectly. Today, we continue with our talk on food safety, and today we look at how unsafe food affect the environment and how all of us get affected. Then we look at way forward. How do we fix this lacuna in the situation? Of course, as usual, we have experts in Mr. Kimera Henry and of course Mr. Bernard Bwambale. You are most welcome, Mr. Kimera Henry.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Dennis, in the studio, and also Bernard. It is an honor having you today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kimera. Mr. Bernard, your introduction remarks.
Thank you so much, colleagues, for making the time again to come and we discuss issues around food safety. And today we shall, of course, be looking at now how food safety issues can be a challenge to the environment. So kindly have your seats, listen in, and we learn together. We shall be grateful for your comments and any questions that we need to respond to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, the experts. I want to thank you so much on behalf of our colleagues globally who watch you, who follow you, and of course, our team in Zimbabwe, Zambia, Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Uganda, our teams on HTV Africa that share this link with your colleagues. We want to thank you so much. Now, Mr. Kimera, may you please give us a recap on where we ended, and of course, you give us a foundation for today's talk.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul, to all your colleagues in the respective studios and all the followers globally. Colleagues, like we roll every month, we deal with an aspect, and every month we have been observing different and commemorating different approaches. You'll appreciate that the month of June, we have been focusing on food safety, and it is an overflow into July. Last Saturday, we got caught up in a number of community initiatives that we are doing and we were unable to roll. But you will appreciate that the month of June, we ran a series looking at children with startedness, looking at issues of food safety in the non-communicable diseases, looking at food safety with regards to trade aspects, with regards to a number of initiatives from a food systems approach. And today we would like to look at food safety with regards to the impact on the environment. And the environment can be looked at in many aspects, but we'll be looking at the environment as in the planet, as a resource and a foundation for food production. Then we can look at it at the environment beyond production, to look at all the different states and stages and activities that are in the food system. Then we can look at it from its approach, from a circularity approach, where we need to be sustainable, bringing in aspects of responsible consumption and production. We will appreciate that aspects that we are faced with in different approaches, looking at the global setup. The UN agencies playing different roles, and different agencies make sure that every aspect uh, has an interlocate or relates to each other, looking at the sustainable development goals, looking at the different initiatives, the different protocols, the different approaches that will make sure that we realize one planet. Different other agencies look at it, One Health. But if we look at it from a one planet perspective, where the UNEP, FAO, or the Food and Agriculture Organization globally bring in the other agencies to make sure that food production does not only doesn't affect the environment, doesn't affect other systems. So bringing in all other systems to make sure that one activity has an impact on the other positively and not negatively. You'll find that globally, aspects that are related to food contribute a very big percentage to the global economy. And you'll find that many processes are carried out in the name of producing food to feed the growing population, the growing demand in different aspects. If we go into our respective countries and we go continent by continent, the natural resources are being opened up, forests being cut down, other areas being brought down and opened up to produce food. Looking at the footprint of the kinds of monoculture in the name of feeding the global consumers whose population is growing on an annual basis. So you'll find that many aspects that we are looking at require approaches of sustainability, approaches of circularity to make sure that there is responsible production and consumption so that we do not impact on the environment. So bringing all those aspects together, this brings in that if the food that has led to cutting down of forests, to opening up of wetlands, to using synthetic inputs like chemicals, looking at fertilizers, looking that are synthetic to increase production, to feed the growing global population. It is very important that what comes out of all those processes is not unsafe. And that's why today we would like to look at the impact of food safety on the environment. Issues to do with unsafe food, if it goes through the respective protocols using standards to certify the food getting onto the market, once it is condemned as unsafe food, just imagine all the resources from human time then going into research, resources that have gone into research, the energy used to open up land, the natural minerals, the diversity, biodiversity, the farmer worker time, the water, the soil nutrients. Once it is condemned, all those are lost at the stage of production. When you come to post-harvest, the processes that are in the human time to harvest, the human time to bundle, the human time to process, to transport, to dry, all that energy is lost once the food is pronounced to be not to be fit for human and or as food and feed. to be onto the market. So all these processes are lost. That's why we would like today to address the aspects of safe food and its impact, looking at the positive impact when food is safe and looking at the negative impact when food is unsafe. So when all this happens, endangering the environment, endangering the economy, and worse still, endangering the consumers who are the market. They at one time they are the market, but the other time they are the workforce that produces. They are the processors. So having healthy consumers who are eating safe food is a benefit to the global economy. It's a benefit to the global environment. It is a benefit with the quality of life of humanity globally. So the discussions that we need to look at need to be broad, not to only look inward at country, but we need to look at the region, the continent, and the global economy, so that we advocate to have responsible consumption and production, so that we impact positively on the planet we live in. We do not have planet B, we only have one planet. Irrespective of advances in science, irrespective of advances in technology approaches, irrespective of advances in academia and the aspects to mitigate climate change, irrespective of the resources. Once the human being, the consumer, is not healthy, the environment, the economies, and humanity is not healthy. So those are aspects that we wish to discuss today. And we thank you, the Humanist TV, for giving us this opportunity to talk to the global world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chimera. That was a good one, and it's a good way to give us a foundation for today's show. Now, Mr. Bwambali, there you are. That's your docket right now. Let's look at how unsafe food affect our environment, because someone is going to be wondering, food is about matoke going bad. How does it affect my environment? I think it's simply going to make my soil much fertile. I mean, someone is going to talk about cassava. How is it going to affect my environment? How can unsafe food in reality affect our environment? Over to you, Mr. Bwambali.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chimera, for introducing the show, and thank you very much, Kato, for the opportunity, and of course our colleague in the studio for ensuring that we are live and kicking. So, of course, as usual, we're going now to dive into some bit of science around food safety and the environment. But I think what is important now is for us to first look at what is this environment that we are talking about? What is it? What are we talking about here? And then later on, we can make solid linkages between food safety and then the different components of the environment. Now, when also you look at the environment, it's a broad word, but basically we are looking at what surrounds us. So what surrounds us is basically the air we breathe in, we have water bodies around, we have the soil. I mean, what is surrounding us? Now, when you look at what surrounds us, you will also note that there are three big things that the globe is struggling with. Currently, the globe is struggling with climate change. That is a very big issue that everybody across the globe is talking about. Secondly, we are talking about the disease burden, that actually currently the whole globe is miserably suffering with the burden of disease, especially in Africa. So the disease burden is very, very high. And as we've been talking about food safety, we realize that there are about over 200 diseases that are associated with consumption of unsafe food. So when they say that the disease burden is high, and you already have over 200 diseases that are actually associated with consumption of unsafe food, so you can really see that the burden is all surrounding food. And then thirdly, we now need to look at issues to do with if the disease burden is high and the climate change issues are high, we are not leaving out the aspect of hunger, that many countries in Africa are suffering from hunger. Many people actually go hungry without eating food. And we have also learned that above 600 million people sleep hungry every single day. They have not eaten anything, but they're just hungry. They go to bed without anything. So when you compare those three things, you look at hunger, you look at the burden of foodborne diseases, and then you look at the burden of climate change, you realize that these three are actually on a rise at the same time, meaning that probably they have a linkage amongst each other. So if you're talking about hunger and you talk about climate change, you know there is a linkage that probably climate change is affecting production of food, and maybe that is one reason why people are sleeping hungry. And then when people start sleeping hungry, you start thinking about the disease burden that may come along with hunger and malnutrition and all that. So we need to put into context those three as we are discussing the subject of today. Now, let us now look at maybe one at a time. When you look at the environment itself, now I want to make quick relationships between food safety and different components of the environment. If you look at the current status of how people in Africa, and maybe especially in our country, Uganda, where we stay, you will realize that most of the washing bays for vehicles are actually at the water points where actually citizens are picking water for domestic use. But you're also aware that vehicles are carrying a lot of chemical compounds, especially petroleum products. So every time you are washing a vehicle at the water source, this wastewater from your vehicle with petroleum products, certainly it goes back to the water, which people are actually fetching to drink. But before we go to the people, these water bodies are actually having microorganisms. They also have animals. So, for example, you'll find that most of our lakes where people are washing their vehicles are actually inhabited by fish, and fish is food for humans. Now, the moment petroleum products and unworthy chemical compounds keep leaching into the water bodies, we keep on reducing the population of the animals in the water bodies. And that means that you'll find so much fish dying because of misuse of chemicals that actually go to the water bodies. If they don't die, the fish gets contaminated with these chemical compounds that are not supposed to be in the water bodies. So when fish gets contaminated, here comes another person now who would want to bring fish to the consumers, goes to the river or the lake and harvests. What is the nature of the fish that they are actually harvesting? This is contaminated fish. Now, there are two things that come in play. Either the fish die, which is already affecting the environment because the population of the environment keeps getting degraded, fish has died, and this is human food. And when this is human food, it means that the person consumes contaminated fish. So at the end of the day, you realize that the component of water, which is an environmental component, is getting contaminated, and everything in it gets contaminated. And at the end of the day, you may have a lot of fish die. And if they die and they're not recognized, that is the nuisance you keep smelling around different sites. So you find that you create a public nuisance from the environmental mismanagement just because you poisoned the fish. Now, that is an element of food safety. If you kept the fish safe, you wouldn't cause this kind of nuisance. Neither would you cause reduced population of fish in their habitats. So that is one thing that we could look around food safety and the environmental component of water. But also water being an environmental component and you pollute it, it means that every living organism that survives on this water becomes polluted or contaminated. And at the end of the day, they will go and feed on that, and you cause more death of other living organisms elsewhere. So it is very important that as you're dealing with food, you ensure that the environment in which the food is actually surviving is optimally kept safe. Two, if you look at the soil which is part of the environmental component, and by the way, soil is what feeds the world. I have always mentioned that if you're asked who feeds the world is fed by soil. because every kind of food that we eat on this planet is actually coming from the soil, whether processed or not. But the origin must have some bit of soil somewhere. Now, as people try to have larger amounts of production, they end up contaminating the soil. And we forget that actually the soil is already having microorganisms that are actually live and surviving in the soil. And there are these living organisms that actually clean up the air. They're the same microorganisms that lead to production of food, and they're the same microorganisms that actually even support humanity. So every time you want to produce bulky volumes of food and you use chemical compounds wrongly, the misuse of chemicals, now you find that someone is going to the first tillage, someone is not going to till the land, but they're just going to pour a chemical. Most of those chemicals penetrate the soil layers and kill or destroy the microorganisms that are actually supposed to be opening up the soil for aeration, for entry of water. These are microorganisms that live, stay in the soil, and they cause the aeration to happen in the soil. But here comes a process of you wanting to have too much food, you contaminate the soil, and then the microorganisms in the soil, all of them either die or relocate from that soil. And so you remain with soil which is actually not fertile. And because it is not fertile, you end up having to buy chemicals every season in and out. And that's why most of our farmers in Africa will keep claiming that the soil we have currently is not productive. And so they think that you have to add chemicals every now and then. Why? Because the chemicals that we've been using to have too much of the food have ended up, decolonizing the soil of the microorganisms. And these microorganisms, if the other time I asked you a question, if it rains in our olden days, you'd see tapeworms, you'd see a lot of worms coming out of the soil. Currently, you cannot see them. In the olden days, there were particular insects and particular worms that whenever it was coming to the season, you would see them coming out of the soil, and the elders would sense that, oh, you know what, rain is about to come. Currently, we don't have those organisms. Where have they gone? The chemicals have destroyed them. And of course, the moment these are part of the environment, they were playing a key role in the environment. They're the ones which were responsible for decomposition of, what we don't need. What was like waste, they decomposed them, and these are converted into manure. But now those converters, which would clean the environment, are no longer in place. So you would find that the mismanagement of chemicals, agrochemicals in the production of food, they end up causing hazards to the microorganisms, but also to the other organisms that survive in the soil. So that lowers the productivity, and it actually makes our environment unfit for human living, but also for other organisms to survive. So the misuse of chemicals is a very big issue when it comes to food safety, and then it ends up contaminating the environment, and then you end up now not having this harmonious living between the microorganisms in the soil. So that is another aspect that we talk about. The other aspect is about the air. Every time people are spraying to produce food, you'll realize that most of the organisms in the air, including the birds, just imagine the birds, the insects, etc., they relocate, and many times actually they die and they become a public nuisance, or they die and the soil cannot use them for any any nutrients, or they become contaminated. Now just imagine the birds, the insects, and other microorganisms in the air get contaminated because someone wants to produce too much food using wrong chemicals, or misuse or misapplication of those chemicals. And at the end of the day, animals, insects, birds get contaminated. Unfortunately, human beings go and hunt for those same animals which are already contaminated with chemicals, and on consuming them, they get challenges of food poisoning and chemical contamination of the bodies. So you find that the whole food system gets ruined because of the misuse of chemical compounds that are used in food system in production, etc. Now, if the animals or the birds and all this die, it will mean that you are compromising the environment because they are playing a key role in environmental conservation. I want you to remember and reflect on the birds that you find in Kampala, on the West Beans and whatever, these big birds. Just imagine if someone was spraying the air in the name of, wanting to produce more food, and then all of those birds get contaminated, they get poisoned and die. It will mean that Kampala, it cannot host people because it will be smelly all through, because those are the birds that actually clean the environment. So the moment you eliminate them in the process of production of food, production of unsafe food, then it means you're causing more harm to society than you're actually causing good. So you find that all of those big birds which clean the air die, and we end up with the smelly cities, with disgusting places, and so that is all part of environmental conservation. If you look at most of those birds and you look at the insects, like maybe the bees, the moment they start relocating because you've sprayed them during the course of production of food, it will mean that, well, one, we lose the pollinators. And that's why many farmers are claiming that, well, these days we cannot produce heavily. How would you produce a lot of food when you have actually chased away the pollinators? So we no longer see a swarm of bees from one place to another because they have been destroyed, or many of them have been relocated just because people are misusing agrochemicals in spraying gardens. And you're producing unsafe food, but also you're chasing away the pollinators that would be relevant for production of the food. So you see that the environment is very key and has a lot of relationship with many things that actually contaminate our food. So whenever you have food contamination, or whenever you have food poisoning somewhere, there is another aftermath that comes to the environment, because you might have killed so many organisms that were very responsible for air conditioning, for cleaning the air, for pollinating our plants, for production of food, etc. So you see that everything that is attributed to contaminating food does not only contaminate food, but rather it contaminates both the food and the environment in which the food has been produced. So you'll find that now, many times, even the food that probably was contaminated may not rot faster. And that means if you want manure from our local substances, materials, you cannot be able to make manure from contaminated substances, because there is always delay in catalytic processes of breaking down some of these. So even if you go and get waste products and dump them in your soil, that you're creating manure, you'll be surprised that actually you may contaminate soil more. Just imagine if you get chemicals that they put on tomatoes to preserve them for long, and then you put them in a garden. What are you causing to the microorganisms in the garden? So they have made the tomatoes unsafe. The tomatoes will take long to rot, but even when they rot, they go along with chemical compounds that actually keep destroying the microorganisms in the soil more and more and more again. So you find that really there is a lot of things that we need to take care of whenever we are talking about aspects of food safety versus the environment. Now, if you look at what I've just mentioned, looking at the water, you know very well, like in our country, most of the foods like yams are produced in wetlands. But when you look at the affluent that is coming from industrial waste into those wetlands, and people have gone to plant food there. So you can imagine that you're destroying the wetland by cultivating maybe food there, and then the affluent from the factories, which are actually even processing the food, are coming into that. And that is why we are having a lot of arsenic in the air. We have a lot of heavy metals in our food. Researches have been done, and they're showing that a lot of yams in Kampala here have a lot of heavy metals, zinc and all, which are harmful to health. But remember, they are coming from the environment, which is contaminated. So by the time you have heavy metals, it means that they are coming from a polluted soil, which has been contaminated by heavy metals from industrial refuge. So you find that in the name of wanting to prevent a food item from rotting faster, you are creating another byproduct, which is affecting the environmental conservation. And so at the end of the day, you find that our soil is no longer productive. our air is no longer productive, our water is no longer productive, and this is why most of the disease-causing agents have become resistant, because one, ozone layer has gone off. We have seen a lot of carbon emissions in the name of processing food, in the name of treating food and all this. And then at the end of the day, you find that climate change comes in, and with climate change, most of the organisms that are supportive to human health actually become resistant. Even the pests and the disease-causing organisms, they also become resistant, and that's why people get sick, and we are not able to treat them. Why? Because the insects, the organisms, the microorganisms that are actually causing these diseases are now resistant to treatment, because many people have eaten a lot of these chemicals in food, and so their bodies are now used to those chemicals and they cannot be used to treat their bodies. And that's why now currently we keep talking about zoonosis. The diseases that are coming from animals are now easily crossing to human beings, and those from human beings are now crossing easily to animals, just because the air, the environment is no longer safe because of the chemical compounds we use in making sure that our food becomes unsafe. So you will find that every time you are polluting food or you're contaminating food, you are actually contaminating both the food and the environment in which that food is coming from. Now, food is the one which is giving us life, and the environment is what is now propelling our life and the life of the food. So you realize that now at the end of the day, we are at crossroads. The environment cannot support us, and our bodies cannot support us, and the food that is coming from a contaminated environment cannot support human life. So at the end of the day, we end up now being miserable, and we end up now in this total mess that we talked about. So you'll expect a lot of hunger even when people are eating. You'll expect a lot of malnutrition even when people are eating. You'll expect a lot of non-communicable diseases. You'll expect a lot of death. You'll expect a lot of climate change, and you'll expect so many wrong things happening just because the food is being produced wrongly. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we discuss this subject, these are some of the preliminary things that I thought that they could categorize us, and then we can be able now to build up a case based on this kind of presentation. And of course, now I will call upon maybe Henry or Kato to build on that, as then I can wind up with what I think government is supposed to do to improve the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wamba. Now, it was an education there you shared with our viewers. Of course, you related environment and the unsafe food. Basically, whoever is watching, when you talk about environment, we talk about living things and non-living things and how they affect us. The biotic nature, the natural world, basically. We talk about forests, our water bodies, we talk about our soils, all these things form what we call the environment. It's a big, big thing. So when you talk about food and we talk about unsafe food and how it affects the environment, then we know that whatever is about environment dictates how we live our lives. For example, Mr. Kimera and of course Mr. Bambale there talked about chemicals. If we keep on spraying our food, our tomatoes, our cabbages, our fruits of whatever nature, and then we eat them, we are diseased because of the chemicals, but also the soils that are becoming less and less productive are affected. So now the unsafe food in that way is connected to the environment, and the environment is a big thing, as I've been saying. So let me call the expert again, Mr. Kimera, to validate this line of thinking more as we move towards what can we do to save the environment vis-a-vis looking at unsafe food. Mr. Kimera.
Yeah, I would like to thank you, Kato and Bernard, for having taken the journey, roving the environment with regards to food, and also continuously pinpointing. The other aspect that needs to come in, apart from the agrochemicals, there are chemicals that public health chemicals too also need to be looked at our unjudicious use of these or our abuse of public health chemicals is also now affecting the consumers, the environment. A number of cases have happened where people say that if I go to a butcher and I don't see flies, I don't buy the meat because they must have applied chemicals. But
Yeah.
we shouldn't kind of uh, uh, jeopardize our health by the wrong misconception. So where we need to make sure we go to public places, we work in places where they bring in what sanitization products. You find on the tables that we eat from, they are cleaned with chemicals. But how best, which dosages are they using? Many people formulate different aspects and they come in selling them, not going through the process of being certified as good for the public use. All these continuously endanger us as consumers, and all these endanger our health. You go to certain places, as you're seated, then people start spraying mosquitoes. I was at one hotel one time, we were seated, the person who was spraying in the name of our safety, with him, he was well protected. As the customers, we were not told that they are going to spray. We only hear a powered spray moving around in the hedges, the flowers, and even up to where we were seated. And we asked, how can you do this without alerting consumers? And unfortunately, a friend the next day fell sick. So these some of these public health chemicals that are being used, they are wrongly applied, and you'll find that the persons that are applying and administering them end up doing abuse, and that endangering the consumers, endangering the air, endangering the food, the water sources. So all these aspects will require good governance with regards to the food system or the food environment. It will require the environment, the water sources, and all these aspects require to have protocols in place that are followed by respective competent authorities. The life of consumers needs to be respected. Some of the times that things that affect consumers are put ahead of the health of consumers. And you'll find what we are saying, we are not against businesses. We say we need better businesses to bring about quality life for consumers, quality economy, the quality environment. That's where sustainability comes in. Socially sustainable, economically sustainable, and environmentally sustainable. So that where we need to be, businesses need to be responsible. Even if you are not a specialist or specialized in the business you're doing, employ specialized people to make sure that they manage the processes, the protocols, the execution of that business. But you'll find that a number of people just go in for unqualified workforce, and they mix up things and they put them onto the market, endangering the health of the consumers, doing uncompetitive business. The genuine or the scrupulous businesses are affected by the unscrupulous, and also bringing about the health burden Bernard talked about. So all these aspects all aspects that are under the different applications that end up endangering the consumer health, the environmental health, even the economic health, need concerted efforts so that we do not endanger ourselves in the broad spectrum. So these are issues that we need to continuously talk about. We don't need only to talk about them when we are getting affected. We need to prepare for the unexpected, to be anticipatory by discussing these issues today, by discussing the different elements. There are different emissions that are there in the environment, and they affect our health. They affect the health of the food, making it unsafe. So
Talking about
this is where we need to look at the aspects of good governance, having quantified institutions, continuously checking out the processes that are being carried out. And then we need to do, I'll call it a 4-pointer action: awareness, 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 awareness. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chimera. Talking about emissions.
Yes.
We talk about industries and factories, especially in Africa.
Yes.
I've seen areas gazetted, and I'm putting it in quotation marks, for factories, for industries. But the waste product from these factories, the waste product from these industries are removed and powered into rivers within the country, into lakes, into water bodies, into streams. And then this water ends up in the homesteads, in the gardens, destroying lives. I've seen how dangerous these emissions are, for example, in Uganda. I've seen how the number of areas affecting the surrounding areas. In fact, there's a place, as you drive towards Namave, there is a place where you cannot drive without putting on a mask on your nose because it is smelling, and has been smelling for years. I'm talking about Uganda. Now, these are issues that the government overlooks, but also the actors in one way or another, because these industries are there, the investors are there, are known, and they continue powering these hazardous waste products into our water bodies, onto our soils, onto our dumping sites, and these all affect the food safety itself, because the aeration is also poisoned. Talk about a person who was clearing your hotel or your restaurant where you are, and maliciously they do that. You gave the example of people in Uganda having a misconception that if meat has no flies, it means it's poisoned. I mean, elsewhere, I've seen meat that is clean. Naturally, there shouldn't be flies, because again, a fly is an indication of, yes, that maybe there's no toxication on this, but again, of darkness in the area. So these are issues we need to talk about so that people are rid of the misconceptions that meat must be clear of the flies. But again, it shouldn't be infected. It shouldn't be with formalin. I think it's called formalin, whatever it is. Now, going back to the expert, Mr. Wambale, as we wind up the show, we have 14 minutes to go.
Let me just put in something very quickly.
Please, Mr. Kimera, come in and then we go back to Mr. Wambale.
Look at the way garbage is dumped right opposite Ambole on the railway line. And I asked myself and their local authorities, if a railway line on both sides becomes a dumping area. And all this, then below, there are yams. So the whole area, you know, and you ask yourself, where is community governance? Where is local government governance? So these are some of the challenging things that
Very, very challenging.
Yes, please.
Either
Thank you.
The government doesn't actually care, but also the activists, the community activists, because we're supposed to have people in the community that mind about their health. Otherwise, Mr. Bambale, over to you. We are looking for ways of how do we handle these challenges of environmental destruction when all of us actually are watching. Mr. Bernard Bambale, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, colleagues, for, every time we discuss these subjects, they look new and you feel like, I think we haven't done enough yet. Now, I want to bring to our attention that every organism in the environment was made for a purpose. And without it, without that organism, there will be a problem. And that's why for us in science, we used to have words like natural selection. Natural selection meaning that an animal will die when it's supposed to die. Naturally, it will go and another one has come. But it wasn't like you have to eliminate. No, it will just go on its own when the environment is balancing its own equations. Now, in the name of people wanting to produce bulky food, this is where trouble came from. I also want to bring to our attention that when, for example, an animal is contaminated by something, let us say maybe it has a chemical or something, remember this animal is food to another animal. Just like you can imagine a cow. A cow is an animal and a human being is an animal. So if a cow, which is part of the animals in the environment, if it has a poisonous chemical compound in it and is slaughtered, it is going to be food for human beings or other microorganisms. Now, if a human being then consumed a contaminated animal, the human being also gets contaminated. If you are unlucky, maybe your cow dies because it has been contaminated by something, maybe a poison or something, and it dies. Even those small insects that will feed on a contaminated cow will also get sick. So this is how unsafe food affects everybody along the chain. So you cannot say that, okay, this is a cow, it was what, but it is going to be eaten by a human being. If it is not eaten by a human being, it will be eaten by another organism. And each of those organisms that will feed on it will have shared on the poison that's consumed. Now, all of these are elements of the environment, which can lead to elimination of most of these organisms out of the environment. And every time organisms are eliminated from the environment, you are causing a gap to environmental conservation. The only challenge, if you look at our authorities, maybe let us use an example of NEMA here in Uganda, the National Environmental, whatever, they have a challenge. For them, they are looking at who is constructing in a wetland, but they're not looking at who is contaminating the wetland, because the wetland has a lot of microorganisms, a lot of life there. And it is that life in those wetlands that actually sustains other beings. So if you look at the construction and you leave who is pouring affluent from a factory into a wetland, that one is not tampered with. There is a problem. So all in all, we need to create as much awareness as possible to make sure that our community members demand for what belongs to them. And actually, because the animals cannot demand, it is us human beings that we demand on behalf of ourselves, but also the organisms that sustain us. People have never known that human beings survive because bees, wasps, microorganisms exist. Actually, if those things were not there, we wouldn't survive. Just imagine if the bees were not there, if the birds were not there and we're only human beings, who would pollinate our food? Who would clean the environment? In the night as we are sleeping, the maristops, these big birds, they are out there eating sewage and all these tomatoes that are rotten and all. They are cleaning. In the morning, we wake up and the environment is clean because of them. If they were not there, we would have died long time ago. Actually, you would not even sleep in your house for a day if those organisms weren't there. But in the name of polluting our food, we also pollute the food for those organisms, because those organisms still depend on what we depend on. So we need to do a lot of advocacy. Let every person in your village, in your community, be responsible for the environment, because it is what is feeding you. It is what is making you live where you are living. It is the environment that is sustaining your entire livelihood. That is one. Let us do a lot of advocacy and awareness. Number two, we have a challenge with governance in most of these countries. Governance issues are really a big problem. The other time I was asked a question. You have elected the LC1 or LC2, local council 3. Where do they go for training? Where do they go for capacity building? Because we are learning that actually most of our leaders, they don't know. So they lead us without knowledge. So like this is a new concept. The person cannot know that is because of environmental conservation that humanity is surviving. So if you're a leader of human beings in a particular area, you are not only leading human beings, you are leading everything in the environment where you stay. That should be something that we need to think about quickly. Now, the leaders we have currently are not interested in knowing how the environment is. They are not bothered about educating their people on how to handle the environment. They are bothered more about investors who are coming to distort their area. So instead of getting bothered about which kind of investment do we put in which area to promote, people's health and people's well-being, leaders are interested in a person who's coming to employ 1,000 people. But why would you employ 1,000 people and they get sick and all the money you've been paying them goes to medical care? So I think the issue of governance, our leaders should be taken to class to understand the basics of public health, food, environment, management of food and all this. They should be in the know so that they lead people with knowledge. What I'm discovering is that most of our leaders are leading us out of, like you lead without knowing. You're just leading a few components of, okay, how do we handle the economy? You forget where the economy is getting polluted from. So I think that is something we need to do as quickly as possible. Empower our leaders to know these things and make them accountable to ensure that they are managing the environment in which people are actually picking the food they are eating, but also managing the people that they lead. And then also, we need also to look at the private sector. How do we make the private sector interested in the subject of food and environment at the same time? Because most of the environmental challenges we have are because of private sector, because they want to produce huge chunks of wood, then they plant eucalyptus. They want to maybe produce huge kind of food and then they cut all the trees, they dry all the wetlands, to create something that cannot add value to society. Now, how do we bring private sector to understand the basics around nutrition, food systems, environment, and how do they understand the basic linkage between all these elements? I think that would be another advocacy agenda. How do we bring private sector to appreciate food systems and environmental systems and their association? Otherwise, people who give private sector money, these are the consumers, are going to die before they provide the money. So whereas we are looking for resources to build countries and all this, we shouldn't forget the consumer, who is actually the one providing the money for governments to grow and for private sector to get more money. Lastly, issues of regulations. Where is the law? How are we enforcing the law? Actually, if I got an open check, I can never request money to come up with a policy in my country, because we have millions of thousands of policies which are redundant on the shelf and others have never been printed. They are still on computers of some people, but they are in force. The question is, who is enforcing them? Who knows them? That is another challenge. When a law is passed, how many consumers, how many community members come to know about that policy? How many of us even understand that there is an environmental policy? How many of us know that there is a food safety regulation or something? Consumers don't know these things even when they exist. If the consumers would know them, probably they would demand from the regulators. But the regulators know these things and they are keeping them to themselves. So, as the remaining population, we do not know. So I would say that, well, in the presence of regulations, standards, and laws and policies, let the users know, let the beneficiaries of these laws know them, so that probably they can hold the governments accountable. Actually, in Africa, the reason why our leaders are not held accountable is because the people they are leading do not know. the laws that protect them. Why should you stay in Namamve and you have to cross with a mask on your mouth or nose because there is a lot of stench, there is a lot of smoke, there is a lot of dust, there's a lot of every wrong thing, and you're staying there for 10 years? So I think there is misuse and misinterpretation of regulations. People don't know the regulations. People are not empowered about the law. People are not even aware of what happens when this law is not enforced. So I think to our dear listeners, we need to be the ones pushing these things. We don't need to wait for organizations. We need us as the beneficiaries of environment, all of us, to put a hand and fight for our rights and to improve our livelihoods. And I think with that, if it is a demand-driven drive, if we are the ones as consumers staging all this, I think we shall be in better position to live better with our environment, to have safer food in a safer environment, and live happily. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bambale there. It was a good one from you there. Mr. Kimera, as we talk about the way forward, of course, give us your parting shot for today's show. Then we shall be able to continue with this and more discussion in the next show. Mr. Kimera.
Thank you very much, Kato. Thank you very much, Bernard and Dennis. Listeners, viewers, we have a role to play. Our role to play is to make sure that the issues that affect us, we speak out and up. And then we engage the duty bearers who have got the mandate through policy, legal, and regulatory framework. So let's continue our quest for knowledge, sensitization, and make ourselves aware for a healthy one planet. We have no other planet to live in. One planet, healthy planet, and let's look at improving our quality of life through speaking out. So it is a great honor, and thank you very much, Kato, the Humanities TV crew, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kimera. And of course, thank you so much, Mr. Bernard Wambale, there for all the insights you have shared with us. Of course, Dennis Bongole for producing the show. And of course, we wish you a happy birthday to you today, Dennis Bongole there in the studios. I want to thank so much my team, our team in Nigeria, with the Rock Thinkers, the HTV Nigeria branch. You have been sharing this show live, and I've seen your comment right here. Thank you so much for sharing it. Of course, the team in Ghana, Nana and the others, thank you so much for sharing this live on our official Facebook platforms. We are doing much better on Facebook pages when you share these videos on your Facebook pages, especially our official HTV pages, where we get more people playing these shows. But of course, we want to encourage you that please subscribe to Humans TV Africa. Our YouTube channel is right there on your screen. We would like to have you as a subscriber to be able to see this and more shows. We have over 500 shows already done on our network. It's a matter of you subscribing to be able to watch this and more. Of course, we have a partnership with Consent Uganda, and these experts from Uganda who always grace this television to teach us more about consumer rights. We shall be with them next Saturday. See you there, and of course, keep your hope alive. Thank you so much, Bernard, and thank you so much, Mr. Kimera, for making it today. See you in the next show.
Thank you. Enjoy your summer.
Thank you.
And
See you. Happy birthday, Dennis.
Thank you.
Now I'm saying Dennis, thank you so much for the show.
Thank you so much, Bernard, and of course, thank you so much, Mr. Kimera there. Of course, Dennis, happy birthday, and everyone who has been watching. Please keep watching, and of course, keep subscribing. See you in the next show.